In an age increasingly shaped by automation, where efficiency is often mistaken for progress, the rise of self-checkout stands as a case study in quiet contradiction. Promoted as a harbinger of retail modernization, promising lower costs, smoother transactions, and empowered consumers, it was, on the surface, a logical evolution. Fewer workers, faster lines, smarter systems. And yet, beneath the glossy veneer of innovation lies a dissonance rarely examined. Self-checkout, far from being the unambiguous success it was marketed to be, has revealed a tangle of systemic vulnerabilities: elevated theft, operational strain, customer alienation, and the erosion of the social contract between store and shopper. By shifting labor onto the consumer, retailers inadvertently loosened their grip on control, inviting not only human error, but human nature in its messiest forms. This is not simply a story about lost inventory. It is a mirror held to deeper questions. What happens when economic logic ignores psychological reality? When technological advancement outpaces social adaptation? And at what point does the pursuit of frictionless convenience begin to unravel the quiet architectures of trust? Let's examine not just what's broken, but why it broke. And in doing so, explore what this unraveling reveals about the fragile bargain between automation and accountability. Shrink, that antiseptic term retailers use to denote inventory loss, feels insufficient to describe what's really happening. It implies disappearance, a passive vanishing. But shrinkage in the self-checkout era is anything but passive. It's a byproduct of behavioral adaptation to a system that has stripped oversight, dissolved social norms, and depersonalized the act of exchange. The mechanisms are familiar, though often oversimplified: barcode switching, skipped scans, accidental omissions. But to reduce these behaviors to theft is to miss the more intriguing transformation taking place, one of moral calibration. Customers, placed in charge of the transaction, begin to negotiate with their conscience in ways they wouldn't in front of a human cashier. A missing scan becomes justifiable. A mispriced avocado, an oversight. This isn't criminality in the traditional sense. It's ambient transgression, a low-level, distributed erosion of shared ethical boundaries. Even honest errors, missed scans, forgotten items, have multiplied in this context, and their cumulative impact is staggering. Studies show that retailers using self-checkout experience losses up to 31% higher than traditional lanes. But again, the more urgent insight lies not in the percentage, but in the principle. When systems prioritize speed over scrutiny, they do so at the cost of structural integrity. The deeper collapse is not logistical, but psychological. When the implicit agreement between retailer and customer becomes unmoored, so too does accountability. Self-checkout was designed with a seductive proposition: reduce labor, retain productivity. But that calculus, so tidy in theory, has unraveled in practice, exposing the paradox of automation in a human-centric environment. Consider the architecture of the modern self-checkout zone. One attendant, often undertrained and overwhelmed, is tasked with supervising multiple machines, troubleshooting technical errors, verifying age-restricted items, and managing queues. In this setup, surveillance replaces service, and vigilance becomes diluted. Theft, whether casual or organized, no longer requires cunning. It merely requires the knowledge that no one is watching closely. And yet, ironically, automation has not eliminated labor, it has merely displaced it. The cashier becomes an IT triage nurse, the store installs layers of expensive surveillance infrastructure, and new job titles emerge: asset protection specialist, checkout concierge, customer service mediator. The cost of replacing a human with a machine is not zero. It is simply relocated into categories that feel more modern but are no less labor-intensive. This is the fallacy of the frictionless model. What we save in direct wages, we spend in indirect dysfunction. What we gain in throughput, we often lose in cohesion. Efficiency becomes an illusion, sustained by hidden complexity, and by the silent labor of managing failure. There is a quiet indignity embedded in self-checkout, one we rarely name aloud. It asks the customer to perform the labor once assigned to a paid professional without compensation, guidance, or even acknowledgement. It is a task masquerading as a privilege, a transaction that increasingly resembles unpaid work. And people feel it. They feel it in the awkward navigation of glitching screens. They feel it in the suspicious gaze of cameras overhead. They feel it in the coldness of a process stripped of social exchange. The retail experience becomes not one of service, but of surveillance. And with that shift comes a new kind of resentment. That resentment often manifests subtly, a skipped item here, a minor mistake there. But it also expresses itself in how shoppers emotionally disengage. They make fewer impulse purchases. They ask fewer questions. They begin to see the store less as a communal space and more as a transactional machine to be outmaneuvered. And yet, even as customers feel alienated, the systems themselves grow more intimate. AI now tracks behavior patterns, flags anomalies, and predicts intent. The shopper is no longer a person, but a data point, a node in a behavioral probability model. What is lost in this algorithmic relationship is nuance. People become problems to be managed rather than individuals to be served, and the store becomes less a space of commerce and more a theater of control. While casual theft may be opportunistic, the vacuum of oversight in self-checkout has also attracted more organized, calculated forms of exploitation. Retail crime rings now see these unmanned kiosks as fertile terrain. They move in coordinated formations, using distraction, confusion, and system manipulation to extract goods at scale. Their techniques evolve faster than the software designed to stop them, and they operate with a precision that often leaves staff bewildered and powerless. This isn't just a failure of security, it's a failure of systems thinking. By designing environments where control is abstracted and authority is ambiguous, retailers have inadvertently built infrastructure optimized not for honesty, but for exploitation. And the cost? It reverberates well beyond the bottom line. It fuels a feedback loop. Rising losses lead to stricter surveillance, which alienates honest customers, which leads to more justification for rule bending, which deepens the distrust. The architecture of the self-checkout zone becomes a paradox of control, increased monitoring paired with decreased human presence, producing a space that feels both watched and lawless. What happens when trust is replaced by transaction? When every act of consumption becomes a test of compliance rather than an invitation to engage? The shift towards self-checkout reflects a deeper cultural drift, a slow erosion of mutual responsibility between business and consumer. In removing the human intermediary, retailers also removed the ritual, the eye contact, the moment of accountability, the unspoken reminder that someone else is part of this exchange. This erosion invites rationalizations that were once unthinkable. Shoppers begin to see themselves not as participants in a shared economy, but as lone navigators in a gamified system, one where the rules are fluid and the goal is to optimize for personal advantage. In this context, honesty becomes optional, a virtue rather than a norm. But perhaps the most profound consequence is existential, not economic. When we automate human interaction out of everyday life, we lose something intangible but vital. We lose the micro moments that sustain social cohesion. We replace empathy with efficiency, and in doing so, we begin to fray the connective tissue of public life. Self-checkout was never just a technological innovation, it was a philosophical wager, a gamble that we could redesign the act of exchange to be faster, cheaper, and more efficient without compromising the delicate scaffolding of trust and accountability that underpins it. That gamble, it seems, has not paid off. What was intended as a streamlining has, in many cases, become a spiraling of theft, of disengagement, of operational fatigue. The machines work, but the system doesn't. And yet, the implications stretch far beyond retail. Self-checkout is a metaphor for a broader tendency in our culture, to confuse automation with advancement and to equate the removal of friction with the creation of value. But not all friction is bad. Sometimes it is the very thing that keeps systems ethical, interactions meaningful, and relationships grounded.